Today we're going to be doing video 2 of chapter 2. And last time we had a video, we talked about the election of 1800, which is how Jefferson and Aaron Burr were able to become president and vice president, and also talked about a flaw in the Electoral College and how we got to the 12th Amendment that we have today. But before we go on, I think it's important to talk about a couple of things that Jefferson did while he was in office. And, there's things such as he lowered the national debt. He reduced the armed forces. He also got rid of the hated whiskey tax. But through all of those different accomplishments, probably none of them was more important or more discussed than the Louisiana Purchase. And what he did, he bought the Louisiana Territory from the French. And here on the map it says, and it calls it the Louisiana Purchase. That used to be called the Louisiana Territory. In total, it's going to cost the United States about $15 million. 11.25 of it was actually given to them in money. The French had a debt to us of about $3.75 million. We pretty much just forgave all of that debt and said we'll keep the total at $15 million, call that even. So what it does overnight, it doubles the territory of the United States. So throughout all of this, what we have today, when we think of America, it started off over here kind of in these 13 colonies. Started to spread west with the purchase of the Louisiana Purchase, but we're still not to the point where we are today. The Spanish territory, looking down here, the Spanish still control Florida, which we'll talk about here later today. And then we also have the British territory, and the British still control up here in Canada. So now moving on to the War of 1812. And we're not going to spend too much time talking about this war. As I said, this is a very brief, very broad chapter. But it's important to kind of talk about some of the things that came out from the war, from the battle. It's often referred to as the Forgotten War. And as I say that, I'm guessing a lot of you thought, I've heard of the World War II, I've heard of the Revolutionary War, I've heard of the Civil War. I have never heard of the War of 1812. And that's because, again, it's important, but it's not really going to last as long as some of the other battles and some of the other wars that we have been involved in. So James Madison, he becomes president in 1809. Again, most presidents, two terms, 8 years, just like George Washington, they're going to step aside. So James Madison, he's going to become president in 1809. And as he became president in 1809, the British, they were practicing impressment, which all of you know and all of you should remember what impressment is based upon that game that we were playing. In case you forgot impressment, what they're doing, they're going and capturing and seizing American ships, basically saying all these sailors, they're now going to become a part of the British Navy. So they're practicing impressment. Americans, how would you feel if a foreign country came and said that you're now a part of their Navy? People are going to be pretty upset about it. So Jefferson, this conflict with the British started with Jefferson. He tried to practice embargoes by saying that we're not going to do any trading with the British, but that hurts the Americans more than he thought it would. So through all of that, eventually, Congress decides that we have to declare war. And probably the most important reason was the idea of practicing impressment. Now, once the war is underway, the United States, they attempted to conquer Canada. They thought that the Canadians would pretty much accept this with open arms. I don't know if it's the feeling of America at this time period, but they pretty much thought that becoming an American citizen was the prize, the ultimate goal that anybody ever wanted in life. So they go and they attempt to conquer Canada. They thought the Canadians would just absolutely come on, we'll allow you to take us over, we'll allow you to become a part of the United States, but they're not going to be willing to do that. So the attempt to conquer Canada is going to be a failure at this point. And probably another big failure was the British. Eventually, they were able to burn down the White House. So the White House, yes, this is the second edition. The original one was burned down in the War of 1812. And just like today, a lot of people or a lot of armies throughout a war, they want to capture the capital city because they think once they capture the capital city, they are going to be victorious. They are going to win at that point. So by getting to Washington, D.C., they were hoping that they were able to capture the capital. However, Madison was able to get out of town. Yes, it was a big loss. Yes, we lost the battle in D.C., but we were able to keep going. Another major battle that I don't have listed on here, the Battle of Baltimore. Now, I'm guessing all of you have heard the national anthem at some point. That came from this war. Francis Scott Key, when he wrote the Star-Spangled Banner, he was actually a prisoner. He was a prisoner in the War of 1812. And while he was watching the Battle of Baltimore take place, which it was, if you think of the national anthem, when it talks about the bombs, What he saw from the battleship was basically attack after attack after attack. And the British, they were able to win that battle. However, they lose the war. The Treaty of Ghent is going to end the war. One thing that's difficult to imagine about this time period, the Treaty of Ghent was over, it was signed, but the war was still going on. Andrew Jackson, who later is going to become president, he led his troops into what's known as the Battle of New Orleans. It took that long for a word, took that long for a message to get there that the war is officially over, but battles are still taking place. So, kind of the big things about the war. Second time America has been to war, both times victorious. That's going to, I don't know if it goes to their heads, but it's going to be important to remember down the road. It also destroys the Federalist Party, because the Federalists early on, they were against having a big national government. They were against having a big national army. Without having that army, without having that federal government, probably would have lost the war. Therefore, this is going to destroy the Federalist Party. Now, moving on to Section 2, the growth of a nation. Now, after the War of 1812, there was a major sense of nationalism in the United States. And nationalism, all it's going to refer to, and I'm going to use that a lot throughout the year, that is pride in the United States. And probably the biggest pride this time is dealing with the fact that we just won 2 major wars, both against the British. On paper, the British, they are the strongest army, have the strongest navy by far. Now, to beat them twice, yes, it was on our home turf. Yes, we kind of revolutionized a couple of different things with guerrilla warfare, but people, they are very, very proud. So that sense of nationalism, that sense of patriotism, that's another way to phrase it, that patriotism is going to be in the United States at that time period. And then also kind of with the idea of that era of good feelings, we get to the Second National Bank. Now, we talked about the First National Bank and how it wasn't technically a part of the Constitution. Congress is able to stretch their powers however they see fit. It came time to renew the First National Bank. It did not pass. The charter was shut down, which realistically hurt the American economy. Because instead of having a national bank, we had all these state-sponsored banks. And these state-sponsored banks, they started to give out loans. People were not paying those back. And prices of things start to go up. So because of some of those issues, and probably, again, the most important one being that prices start to increase, the Second National Bank is now put into place. It has a charter, has the power to issue currency and control state banks. So they're going to be the people who are in control of lending, interest rates and things like that, which you probably think is a bad thing when you hear about them being able to control interest rates. But really what they do, they use that to kind of control how the economy is going to be. And we'll talk about that a little bit later when we talk about the Great Depression. Now, nationalist diplomacy. Diplomacy based upon those 2 wars is going to start to change. And the way it starts to change is we start to have that sense of we are the strongest country, we can go to war, we can win these battles, we can kind of do whatever we want. And this diplomacy, the biggest issue is going to start with the Spanish. Now, if you think back to that early map that I showed you on the first slide today, Florida was not going to be controlled by the Americans. The Spanish, they controlled Florida. But there was an issue at the border. And the issue was runaway slaves would run to Florida. They would be safe there. Southerners were very, very against that. There's also different battles that were taking place throughout the different Native Americans or Native American tribes. Tribes from Florida would cross the border. There would be fighting that would take place. They would run back to Florida because Americans, they could not go after them. If they went after them, that's pretty much a declaration of war. They just went and invaded a foreign country. So to kind of help patrol the border, Andrew Jackson, he is going to be sent there. And this is the second time we heard his name. Talked about him with the Battle of New Orleans. Now he's going to be in control of the troops as they go into Florida. Now, it says on there that the attempt was to take the land. That's going to be the latter part. The early part, they want to control it. They want to make sure that these battles are not taking place. They want to make sure that there's going to be peace. However, the Spanish cannot guarantee that peace. So instead of going to war over Florida, they pass what's known as the Adams-Onis Treaty. And that gives Florida to the United States. So that's going to be the first thing dealing with the Spanish. The second thing with this national diplomacy is going to be the Monroe Doctrine. And this is probably the biggest, the boldest, the bravest thing to happen in the United States at this time period by issuing this Monroe Doctrine. And what it does, it declares that the American continents, So that's North America, South America. They are off limits for future colonization. Now, if a country already had a colony, yes, they could keep it. But say if Spain wanted to, say they had control of Cuba, and now they wanted to go and take control of Haiti, technically with the Monroe Doctrine, that is off limits. Now, to back that up, Monroe at this time period said, if any country is willing to try to do this, if they want to try to create this new colony, they are going to go to war with the United States. And again, this is early 1800s. We have been a country for less than 50 years. And now to say, if you are going to go and try to colonize any part of the Americas, we will go to war with you, that's a pretty brave thing to say. However, this was rarely tested. People were afraid. Now, dealing with the economy, and the last thing we're going to be talking about here in the next few slides is going to be the economy. Industrialization starts in England, in Great Britain in the early 1700s, but eventually that's going to come over here to the United States. Just like all major technological ideas, it's going to start in one country, someone's going to hear about it, it's going to go to this next area. But large-scale manufacturing is going to begin with this Industrial Revolution once it gets over here to the United States. And there are a couple of big and a couple of key reasons why this is going to be here in the United States. The first one is something known as free enterprise. And this is going to be another term that we're going to talk about a lot throughout the entire year. In America, can you start a business? Absolutely. There's really no control of the government to say, no, you cannot start this, you cannot start an auto body shop. No, you cannot be a teacher. No, you cannot be a farmer. That's free enterprise. So by saying, and coming over here to America, whatever you want to build, whatever you want to create business-wise, as long as it's legal, you can do that. Free enterprise is going to start to spread out the entire economy. The next thing is going to be competition. Competition kind of in two ways. The first thing, competition drives prices lower. And I always use this example in class. If you are competing with a business and they sell a product for $5, what are you going to do? Probably drop it to $4.50 because most of you today, you're going to buy whatever is going to be cheaper. So competition is going to help drive those prices lower. It also encourages new technology. Who's going to be able to produce the most of it? Who can produce it the cheapest? But this drive to have large-scale industrialization and competition is going to kind of work hand in hand here. And the last one, we have lower taxes in America at this time period. These European countries, European powers, they are going to start to raise their taxes. Now, by keeping taxes here low in America, Congress thought that we are going to be able to have more goods, sell more of it, and we're going to be able to have a bigger profit because of it. We're going to be able to make more in that tax revenue because more things are going to be bought. And then the bottom right here, I have an image. We'll talk about that tomorrow, but that was going to be one thing that helped out with this industrialization. So if you want to take a minute or two, look at it and try to figure out exactly what that is. And then the last one, the importance of agriculture. Now, North and South is going to be split for a couple of different reasons. And as we talk about in the next video, we're going to talk about some of this division that takes place between slavery, the idea of emancipation, things along those lines. But it's also going to be different based upon the economy. Agriculture is king in the South. Industrialization, king in the North. But agriculture still is going to be the leading economic activity. And the reason that's the case, first one, it employs the most people. So in the South, most of the people are going to have something to do with agriculture. Also, those raw materials, once they're sent to the North, are also going to employ people there. So it's kind of almost helping out both sides there. It also produces the most wealth. And I already talked about the production is going to start to soar because of Eli Whitney. He creates something known as the cotton gin. Basically, this is going to almost triple what production was. There's going to be more farms. There's going to be more agriculture in the South. But it also has a major side effect. In the South, most of the people that were working on cotton fields were brought over as slaves. So the cotton gin helped out the economy, but it also had the negative effect when it came to slavery. So we're going to stop here after talking about the economy and how they were going to be different between the North and the South. Again, I always say it, but make sure to have your notes done in class, so come and check those. Make sure to have a question, a discussion question about something we can talk about in class tomorrow.